All right.
Okay. I see we have participants joining us. Let me get your bio on my screen here. And we'll just edit all this out in post, as they say, right?
Sounds good. Works for me.
All right. There we go. There's the bio. And welcome. This is Warren Boykin from NAMI, Northern Illinois. I'm the Program and Outreach Coordinator, and it is my pleasure to welcome our special guest, Cody Berillo, and all of our wonderful viewers to leading the conversation from NAMI, Northern Illinois. I'm just going to read our introduction here. Are you someone, or do you know someone who is a caregiver feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, and isolated? You are not alone, and you don't have to do it alone. Join us for a presentation on caregiver support designed to empower, educate, and uplift those who give so much of themselves to care for others. In this training, you will gain knowledge about practical tools for managing stress and burnout, strategies to balance caregiving with self-care, communication skills to advocate for yourself and your loved ones, and resources available to caregivers. And in order to do that, we are going to have our special guest, Cody Berillo, of Four Corners Wellness. Is that correct?
That is correct.
A little bit about Cody. Cody Berillo earned her BS in Family and Child Studies from Northern Illinois University and has her MSW, Master's of Social Work, from Aurora University. Since 2018, Cody has been providing grief support services to the community of Rockford. She's worked with different organizations throughout the community to provide advocacy, crisis intervention, and grief support services to local families in various settings. Cody offers grief counseling, support, and companioning to the bereaved. Cody believes companioning bereaved individuals involves reflecting on the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual parts while following a holistic model. She has experience working with children, adolescents, and adults in the areas of death and grief, anticipatory grief and terminal illness, extended grief, and caregiver support. Cody earned her certificate in grief and death studies through the Center for Loss and Life Transition in Fort Collins, Colorado. So I'd like to welcome our special guest, Cody Berillo.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes. Now, I want to help you by sharing your PowerPoint presentation. We normally have your picture in the corner. I'm not sure if I know how to do that, so bear with me, everyone, while I share that screen.
You just want me to nod to let you know to skip to the next slide?
Or actually, I may not be able to see you, so you may have to say next slide.
I can do that. Not a problem.
Here we go. And let me know if you can see the slides now.
I can see it.
All right.
So hopefully everybody else can see it.
Oh, I think I have I can put you in the corner. Can you see you too?
I can see you in the corner. As far as chat goes, I don't know if anybody has that available.
That's a great question.
But if we don't,
I will monitor the chat if you want me to. And since this is a webinar, we have a Q&A box. If anyone has any questions, please type your questions into the Q&A, and we'll have some time for questions, I imagine, at the end of the presentation.
Yes, we will.
Okay.
If there's any pressing questions, just type it in the chat and Warren can, bother me to stop, and then we can answer those questions if they're pressing. Otherwise, we can certainly send them to the end of our session here, and I can answer what I am available to do.
All
So,
right.
all right, so he gave me a wonderful introduction. So I'm here to help you guys understand caregiver support, how to provide it, how to identify a caregiver, and then provide community resources and online resources as well. So you guys are familiar to not only give to yourself if you're a caregiver, but if there's any providers on here who works with caregivers, um, so that you guys are familiar and will hopefully be knowledgeable about it by the end of the hour here. So go ahead to the next slide, please.
And yeah, you can do the nod thing even. I can see you.
Okay, oh, that's right. Yeah, you can see me.
Yeah.
Okay, so he gave me a wonderful introduction, so I don't necessarily need to spend a lot of time on here, but just kind of wanted to brief you guys on what my job here is at Four Corners. I'm a therapist here at Four Corners. I've specialized in grief and bereavement since 2019. I also work for the Haven Network, which is a perinatal hospice and bereavement center. I've been there since 2018. I'm the vice president there. I do family services as well. And then I'm their volunteer therapist when we do find the time. And then, as Warren did mention, I did earn my death and grief studies certification out in Fort Collins, Colorado, at the Center for Loss and Life Transition under Dr. Alan Wolfelt. So if anybody knows his work, I follow a lot of his work in the companioning model, which I've done a seminar before for you guys, leading the conversation surrounding grief in general. So you might, if you've been to that one, you might have heard me talk about that companioning model. Um, if you guys do have questions about that, you can send me email separately, put them in the chat. We can talk about it at the end. But we will get into our presentation here. Okay, so who are caregivers? So caregivers are families and friends, right? Or professionals providing care to individuals with health challenges. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, a lot of the times people think of caregivers as people caregiving to those who are elderly. And yes, those are within that realm, right? They do fit under the umbrella, but you can be a caretaker of anybody with any health challenges from birth to end of life. So if you're a caregiver and you have a child with special needs or a teen with special needs, a young adult who might live with you, or an elderly parent or a spouse who might be terminally ill, those all fall under the umbrella. And of course, I'm sure I'm missing some, so don't take everything that I say as 100% solid in the fact that that's it. You know, there's always room for more to add, right? So it's really somebody who has direct partnership with a loved one who's caretaking for them. And they're really often unrecognized parts of our healthcare system. So somebody who brings you to every doctor's appointment, somebody who feeds you, somebody who cares for you. So what you're providing, you know, you're doing their daily, everyday tasks, or you know, again, being that direct partner to that loved one, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend. But when you're called upon to be a caregiver, it's so important to know your role as that caregiver. So we'll go to the next slide here. So speaking of, what is the role of a caregiver? So a caregiver is somebody who assists with your daily living tasks, medication management, providing emotional support. And then the most important that I like to talk about is the advocacy for the care recipient, because I think that that's where, if we don't care for ourselves as caregivers, that's the first thing to typically go. We know that they need their food. We know that they need their medication. We know that we have to do their everyday living tasks, but the advocacy often falls to the wayside, or that emotional support, because we're so burnt out as caregivers that those are just extra roles that we just sometimes, we're just trying to meet ends meet. So the role of a caregiver, right? It can be so many different things, but those are just kind of some highlights here on what to expect when you are that role of the caregiver, who you are. So oftentimes there's so many challenges. And again, this is just 6 under a list of many that I could have probably provided, challenges that are faced by caregivers. And I'll go through a couple of them. I'm not going to go through all of them. But I'll go through a couple of them here during our presentation to show you that, you know, provide you some examples and to show you what can kind of come along with that. So some of the challenges here that we face as caregivers are physical challenges, emotional and mental health challenges, financial challenges, social challenges, practical and logistical challenges, and then that long-term uncertainty. It's again, this is just an umbrella, and these are six of probably 100 that we could probably provide as far as challenges faced by caregivers, because it is such a rewarding yet difficult role. So I just wanted to give you kind of a basis of what I often see here in my office as probably the six main challenges that we talk about in therapy. Go ahead and go to, thank you. So physical challenges, so fatigue and exhaustion from long hours of care. So if you are a caregiver and you work full time, because financially you have to provide, and we'll get into that, but you come home, right, and you are that person's caregiver, right? You might be fatigued and exhausted. And then potentially throughout the nighttime, you're the caregiver, and so you're not getting your full 8 to 10 hours required of sleep, and you're not feeling 100% yourself. So going into that, those sleep disturbances, especially for caregivers of individuals with dementia and chronic illness, terminal illnesses in that as well. So dementia, there's that sundowning where they're awake during the nighttime and sleeping during the day. So if you're you're on a normal sleep schedule and they're not, that makes it so difficult for you because your sleep is often being interrupted. Same with chronic illness and same with terminal illness. Oftentimes a caregiver will sleep next to somebody who might be on hospice, just to hear and make sure that, they're not needing anything in the night, because oftentimes if, the caregiver is at home with their loved one that they're caring for, they are the ones that are being relied upon, right? We don't often have that outside support overnight. There are services, but for majority of caregivers, we see that to be a big downside there. And then the physical strain from lifting, transferring, or supporting the care recipient. And that's even if it's a child, right? If we're not in the best physical health, or even if we are, right, our bodies only can do so much so often. If you're doing repetitive lifting, and you're not taking care of your physical body, then that actually can deteriorate over time, causing additional strain or challenges in that physical aspect. And then neglect of their own health due to lack of time or focus on self-care. But I stress a lot of times you can't be an effective caregiver if you're not caring for yourself, right? We can't pour from that empty cup. We can't, if it's bone dry, nothing's coming out. We can't give in order to be a good caregiver, right? You can do the best you can. And I love that, people try so hard, and caregivers are so often overseen, and underappreciated. But really that neglect of their own health is so common. Even if something as small as a headache, right? I'll deal with it later. I'll drink water later. I'll take care of myself later. But in order to be efficient and effective, we have to care for ourselves first. And then we're going to talk about those emotional and mental challenges. For caregiving. So this is a lot of what I see in my office one-on-one, with caregivers that I speak to about whether it's, again, whether it's an elderly that they're caring for, whether it's a chronic illness, or whether it's somebody, that's a child or a teen, that they're caring for daily. So stress and burnout from constant responsibility and lack of breaks. Again, using the example of, if you're even at work all day and then you come home and you're that caregiver, you're really at risk for a lot of stress and a lot of burnout from having all these constant responsibilities, and we're not receiving the breaks. And even if you don't work all day and you are that person's caregiver all day, you're still at significant risk for stress and burnout, because you're constantly making appointments and cooking and feeding and, sometimes changing and a whole slew of things. I'm sure everybody can name a million off the top of their head. Also being at risk for anxiety and depression, especially when dealing with progressive or terminal illness. And oftentimes what we see in there too, is anticipatory grief. So you're anticipating your grief process after the loved one passes away if we're dealing with a progressive or terminal illness. So oftentimes these are things that I work on here in therapy with my patients and clients to prepare them and cope with that anticipatory grief. They're anticipating that loss. It's exactly what it sounds like. You can experience anticipatory anxiety as well. And then just overall feeling down and depressed because it's a hard situation when you're dealing with progressive or terminal illness. And then guilt. Guilt is a very common one I see in here. People often feel as though they aren't doing enough or they're feeling resentment towards their loved one because, maybe it's a spouse and, you're having to go from being a spouse and changing to being a caregiver. And that's a really hard process for our brains to kind of understand and us to cope with. So if we don't have that support there, we can really start to sit in that guilt, and that can really frustrate and hurt us in a lot of ways. Um, Okay, and then that grief and loss, especially in cases of cognitive decline or end of life care. Again, that terminal illness might be that anticipatory loss, but cognitive decline, such as maybe dementia or any other cognitive ailment, right? You're losing that person, unfortunately, more than once before the actual physical death. So you're going through these grief processes along the way and then anticipating that final physical loss. So these challenges are really important to recognize, not only in yourself, but those that you work with for caregiving. And then isolation and loneliness, especially for caregivers as a full-time role. So caregivers might engulf themselves in that role, which is necessary a lot of the times, and you lose a lot of support from friends or family because you're not getting that respite or that care, and you're not taking care of yourself to go do things, or you're not feeling supported, right? So we might isolate and we might feel lonely. Sometimes people push others away, saying, no, I don't want you to help because I got it. This is my responsibility. This is my spouse. This is my child. This is my whoever that loved one might be. Um, so sometimes we self-isolate or we make ourselves lonely in times of caregiving. So, but these are just a few of those emotional and mental challenges that I wanted to talk about here, the ones that I most commonly see here in my office, just because they're so important to recognize and to work through while we're going through them. So we can compartmentalize and provide support where it's necessary and help the caregivers find community resources and online resources as well to prevent and or cope with any of these five big challenges here. So next slide, please. Thank you. And then financial challenges. There's so many, I just listed, three big ones again. But there are so many financial challenges that we come across from caregiving. If it's a loved one, oftentimes it's not paid, right? So if you're having to quit your job, then we've lost our income and now we're having to caretake for this person. Or you have out-of-pocket expenses, whether that's for medical equipment, whether that's for the actual caretaker themselves, if you trying to split care, or if you're trying to work through the day and you have to pay somebody to be there for the day or nighttime, or however everybody's unique schedules have, out-of-pocket expenses can really add up, and insurance too. I know we pay for the insurance and things like that, but it doesn't cover everything, and copays still do add up. And then limited financial support, both personally and through programs. Of course, if you do have a job, there's certain criteria that you'd have to meet to go on something such as FMLA, which is Family Medical Leave Act. So there are a lot of financial challenges there that a lot of caretakers do experience, just in totality. So if anybody has additional ideas, I'm sure there's several you can list. And then social challenges. This one's important to understand here, because if we're not doing well socially, and everybody's social battery looks different. Let me be clear about that, right? So if we're not doing well socially, it's really hard for us to provide that emotional support for our recipient, our care recipient there. But again, some people's social batteries look different. So my battery might be, I might be a very social person. And if I'm the caretaker and I'm not meeting those needs, and it doesn't mean you have to go out, but maybe providing, contact with friends, things like that, building your support network. I think that that's very important. to recognize that, maybe my social battery might be bigger than somebody else's who might be a caretaker, and maybe they've always been more of an introvert. Maybe to them it's sitting and, joining a book club, and they just, or it's an online support, or it can be many different things. But so social challenges, being aware of everybody's social battery, and what their tolerance is socially. But those neglected relationships are big. Friends and family do drift oftentimes due to the lack of interaction. And it's especially common the longer the time goes on. So sometimes caretaking for people is weeks to months, others it's years. So again, every situation is unique in that way, but sometimes over time, those neglected relationships do fizzle. If you think of any relationship you might have had, whether it's a romantic relationship or a friendship or, mentorship, if you're not contacting each other, those things do dissipate over time, and they do provide space and kind of separate just naturally. And in all relationships, again, this is not a one size fits all. Every situation is unique, every relationship is unique. So, but having those neglected relationships, I do know several caretakers that I've seen over the years who really discussed this idea that, they may have been a long-term caretaker, and they really lost a lot of friends because they couldn't go out anymore because they were caretaking, or, they couldn't say yes to everything, and they, maybe couldn't golf anymore, or maybe couldn't, go on bike rides, or couldn't go out to dinner, right? Because it might be difficult to get your care recipient in and out, and or they might not be able to leave the home. So again, those neglected relationships, they do provide a big social challenge for us as caretakers. And then that role reversal, this is so difficult for a lot of people when we're caring for a parent or a spouse. I see this a lot in spouses when you're going from being a wife to now a caretaker. Your love over time changes. It doesn't mean you love the person any less, right? But you're going from this wonderful romantic love to now this wonderful caretaking love, and you're caring for them, right? In sickness and in health, right? All those things that we say up at the altar, which is so true. But the role reversal is so challenging for a lot of individuals when we are caretaking there. And then family tension. I know a lot of the times people don't agree on the role as caretakers, or financial decisions, or medical decisions, scheduling decisions. I'm sure there's a many ways we can talk about family tension. This can be also friendship tension too. It doesn't necessarily have to be just family tension. It can just be tension in general. It can be work tension. It can be family. It can be friendships. Work tension, obviously, they can't necessarily disagree on your caregiving role, but they can disagree on time off and or providing FMLA. Again, there's certain requirements you have to meet for that, which is on their website there. And, I'll provide some resources here at the end, but it's just something that being aware of these social challenges for caregivers, it puts us in the seat of understanding where they might be coming from if they're feeling frustration in relationships or tension with family, or having that role reversal difficulty. Okay, so the importance of a caregiver. Um, Caregivers are so important in so many ways. Again, they're often underpaid and under-recognized, but they're so important. Um, so they improve the care quality for recipients, they support caregiver well-being, and they reduce healthcare costs, right? Those are our more, I don't know, our more professional ways, but the importance of a caregiver, um, or I'm sorry, the importance of caregiver support, right, is so that we do improve the care quality for our recipients. Again, if you're taking care of yourself, you're able to take care of your recipient better. Hopefully too, to prevent that burnout. So in order to support this caregiver, right, we're going to prevent the burnout, then it's going to have this waterfall effect. And then supporting the well-being of the caregiver, because they deserve to feel and be healthy as well. And again, it's that reduced healthcare cost. Thank you, Warren. Okay, so some types of support available here. obviously there's emotional support. We talked about challenges, we talked about mental health challenges, we talked about social challenges. So that emotional support, there are support groups and therapies. Like I was saying before, caregiver support does fall under my realm here at Four Corners under grief, just because you are losing different parts of your life and or that person. Doesn't have to be that physical loss, but it does fall under my umbrella in grief. So if you find therapists out there, there are so many wonderful therapists in our area here in Northern Illinois that can provide emotional support for caregivers. And I really, really, really encourage most caregivers to get the support while they're caregiving. We're going to talk about some barriers a little bit later, but a lot of the times people say that they don't have time for therapy because, right, it's an hour plus you have the travel time. However, now since 2020, we are now able to provide telehealth services. So most therapists, I can't say all, but I would say most therapists do provide telehealth services, including myself. And I provide them via phone and video, just because I understand with caregiving, sometimes it's literally you're in the kitchen making dinner and you've got your AirPods in and you're trying to do things at the same time. I think it works best if obviously we're in person in the office one-on-one, so you really get that alone time. But if it's something where you really cannot, I still encourage people to reach out for therapy, that individual therapy, even if it has to be phone or video. And then the support groups. I don't know of any local support groups for caregivers specifically to caregivers here in the Rockford area. And if somebody has a different uh, idea or knows of one, please put it in the chat. I'm not familiar with in-person support groups here, but I know that there are a lot of online support groups, and I can provide some of those resources here in a little bit. And then respite care. Respite is getting a break, right? So having somebody to come in to give you that break. So whether it's you utilize respite care to go to the grocery store, you utilize respite care to go to the gym, right? You're taking care of your physical health. Utilize it to come to therapy to take care of your mental health and emotional health. But respite care is another form of support available to caregivers. And again, there are some barriers there, right, with finances, sometimes potentially, and resources. But respite care doesn't have to look like a professional company that comes in. It can be respite care is your neighbor comes over for an hour, right, to help caretake while you go mow the lawn or while you go for a walk. It doesn't always have to be some outside source that comes in. So respite care, again, it can be a neighbor, it can be a friend, it can be a family member, it could be a coworker, anybody that you find value and trust in to help watch somebody just for that short period of time. And it's not a length of time, it's usually a brief period. I do have people who have utilized respite care to come to therapy, and I encourage them. That's wonderful, and I love that. But also utilize that respite care. If you're going to do a 2-hour block, maybe use one of those hours for therapy, but maybe you go for a walk, or maybe you do something you enjoy. It doesn't necessarily always have to be a task, because I think that also leads to that burnout. And then financial aid and benefits. There's a lot of financial aid and benefits out there. I know that they're limited on requirements. Again, that FMLA is one. There's some government support that you can be a paid caregiver. Again, you have to meet requirements for that. And then training and education. So there's I know Medicaid, I'm sorry, not Medicaid, Medicare. I know that they provide online videos and sometimes do some trainings and provide that to the caretaker. So those are also very important to look out for and understand, right? That it's okay to sit and oh, perfect. Thank you, Warren. So NAMI does have a parent and caregiver um, support group for parents and children with mental health conditions. So that's actually a wonderful thing. And I love that you guys do that. So going back to that support group for the emotional support, NAMI does provide one. So you can either email Warren, I'm sure, or look on their website and their calendar for more information. And then Mary also mentioned that Trinity Outreach at St. Bridget in Loves Park offers a personal or a person spiritual support group for caregivers as well as those facing mental health and substance use disorders. That's wonderful. Thank you guys so much. I honestly, I hadn't heard those. So I like to broaden my horizon too with knowledge, so I can provide them to caretakers as well. So I appreciate you guys adding that in the chat for me. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Warren, thank you. And then, so self-care. I know anybody who's been to therapy, whether it was mental health therapy, whether it was grief therapy, has heard the importance of self-care. We do preach it a lot. I hope all the therapists who do preach it are just as good as doing it themselves. Sometimes we are our worst patients, but self-care is so incredibly important, especially for those who are caretaking. So it's utilizing the importance of rests and breaks, managing guilt and stress, staying connected socially, seeking professional help when it's needed. So kind of everything we've already touched on, needing those rests and breaks. So utilizing some respite care, managing your guilt and stress, whether that's, whether it's self-managed or through therapy or support groups. And again, there's two of them provided in the chat there for everybody there. And then we talked about social challenges, so staying connected socially. And then also Holdingford, Minnesota has Helping Hands Outreach. And they offer caregiver consulting services. So that is a wonderful thing too. So Teresa in the chat, if you guys wanted to get a hold of her as well, that's an amazing one too. So, and then seeking professional help when needed. So if you feel as though, you're seeking professional help, you can call us at Four Corners and we can help guide you, or, if it's not here at Four Corners, there's plenty of counseling agencies out there. NAMI can help guide you as well, and finding those supports that you guys would need professionally. It's just that extra step there. Okay. So again, I'm sure if anybody's ever looked into self-care or done self-care, I hope this isn't a participant one. I would normally ask you guys what you guys have done and how important that has been to you guys. But I put the first one as prioritizing sleep because I feel as though that's one of the most important ones. If we are not well regulated at night, we have a hard time regulating our moods and emotions during the day. It provides that break for us. So if we are prioritizing our sleep and that's all we can do, you are still taking care of yourself. And I am very proud of you for that, right? Taking a walk. Walks are great. It's beautiful fall weather out today. Hopefully it doesn't get too cold too quick here. Hydrating regularly, that is something that goes to the wayside for a lot of caregivers. A lot of caregivers don't think about it and they just keep going, doing. And they're like, oh my gosh, I have this massive headache. Well, they haven't had any water for the day or they've had very little, right? Stretching is a great one. It's just a slow leisure activity. It helps you physically too. So it's a wonderful, wonderful self-care idea. Taking a soothing bath. Not everybody has a tub, but if that's something that you love to do, and that's again, these are just some ideas. You can look up self-care ideas online and there's probably millions out there. What it comes down to is taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and it's doing something you enjoy. So again, that taking a soothing bath, journaling your thoughts. Once again, not a one size fits all. Not everybody loves to write. I used to love to write, and then I went to grad school and wrote a million papers, and it's not something I've ever gotten back into. Something important too is that limiting of your screen time. A lot of the times people will utilize self-care as just scrolling social media, but what you're utilizing is that escapism. You're really just trying to get out of your world and into a different world that doesn't feel as daunting or as overwhelming potentially. So limiting that screen time and maybe not using social media as one of your self-care breaks there. And then laughing often. So, whether it's maybe you're naturally funny, or maybe you like to watch comedians or, being by people who make you laugh and make you smile. It doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, something was funny and we laughed, but Just something that really lightens your spirit and lightens your soul is so important too. Laughter makes a long life, right? You can meditate. There's some applications for your phone out there. There's the Calm app. There's something called Insight Timer. I utilize Insight Timer myself for meditations. I like it because there's a paid version and a not paid version, and I use the free version. I've never upgraded to the paid version, and I've found plenty of meditations on there. There's a little search bar. That you can type in, and you can type in caregiver support, and there'll be a bunch of meditations that you can utilize there on, on that app, specifically Insight Timer. It also provides sleep stories, sleep meditation, sleep sounds. There's meditation challenges you can do. Sometimes there's emergency meditation. So like a 1 minute meditation where you're like, I feel like I'm on the verge of a panic or anxiety attack. Or it's something, where you do a challenge where it's a meditation for an hour, right? So I'll put it in the chat here so you guys can see Insight Timer Calm app. So you guys can know that those two are apps that I use. Again, I use Insight Timer. I have had the Calm app, but I know you have to pay for that. But meditating, and you can find these other things like that on YouTube too. Meditation is usually pretty common. So, there's a lot of free ways we can set time aside to meditate. And meditating doesn't often have to be for a lengthy period of time. Again, I mentioned the emergency meditations, but even if you had 5 minutes, utilize that time, to meditate or take care of yourself. And then practicing your spirituality. Spirituality is really important for a lot of people. So I would say, if that's something that you find very valuable, to practice your spirituality, that counts as self-care. And then connecting with friends, again, that kind of connects us back to that laughing often. But connecting with the friends, celebrating small wins. I'm very firm and believe in something called tiny habits. So when you do tiny things, it creates bigger habits, right? So celebrating the small wins, because they do add up to bigger wins. So if you didn't have to take an Advil for a headache that day, celebrate that, right? Or, you got 5 minutes to meditate, celebrate that. Enjoy a good book. That's another self-care idea you can utilize. And then practice deep breathing. One that I often teach is that 4-7-8 breathing. It's a little bit more of a grounding technique. So you inhale for 4, hold for 7, and exhale for 8. Again, it's 4-7-8. So that's just one that's really quick to remember. So if you've got a lot of things jumbling around in your head, because being a caretaker, it's really overwhelming. But if you can remember 4-7-8, you can remember, okay, inhale, stop, exhale. Because practicing deep breathing is also kind of, in that meditation category too. These are just some ideas for self-care. Again, a very small list in comparison to what I could write, and or what I talk about in here with my clients, because we do really try and focus on self-care here at, in therapy and with F4 Corners. Okay. So earlier I mentioned a lot of times people will come across barriers with caregiving, and I understand and I empathize that it has got to be so difficult to find the time, but a lot of the people will say, I don't have time. So again, start small, create those tiny habits, even if it's 5 minutes of intentional self-care, that can make a difference. So I often tell people, okay, when we're driving alone, what's oftentimes the first thing people do is they're calling somebody. So let's start driving alone. Let's disconnect for a moment, and let's take that 15-minute drive. And whether it's listening to your favorite music, or sitting in silence and processing your day, or listening to calming music, or listening to an audio book, or a recorded meditation, a guided meditation. Just don't close your eyes while you drive, right? But if we don't have the time, recognizing that we might have a little bit more time than we think. It's just we're using it for other things. So maybe readjusting there, again, by starting small, even if it's 5 minutes, even if it's, I'm going to go pretend I'm in the bathroom and sit in there for 5 minutes and meditate or deep breathe. Great, that's wonderful. Celebrate that when you've done that. So, if we can overcome that barrier there of I don't have time, you can notice a big difference in your empathy, your risk of burnout. Again, it's a water effect. And then I feel guilty. A lot of the times people will feel guilty for taking care of themselves. But remember, you cannot pour from that empty cup. You have to fill it up somehow. So caring for yourself equips you to care for others more effectively. So again, if you're not taking care of yourself, you're just giving, 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 you're not receiving at all. That really burns you out so quickly. And a lot of times people will start to feel guilty. Well, I don't have the time, or I feel guilty, or this person can't take care of themselves. So I feel bad, going on a run, or, going for a walk. That just, I feel guilty doing that. But if we can overcome that guilt, again, and that can be done through therapy or some self-work there. But remembering that you cannot pour from that empty cup, I think we can overcome that barrier as well. And then a lot of the times people don't know where to start. So start small, right? The list that I provided is a very small list, but you can use that list, right? You can print it out, or, take a picture of it, or make your own list and create, choosing one or two of those ideas is so important, and incorporating those into your routine and then building from there, right? So if you're thinking, okay, I'm going to meditate, but I'm going to start small. I'm going to meditate for the 5 minutes. You're starting somewhere. So we do know where to start. It's just creating that list and providing that time. Um, okay. And then some local resources here in our community. You guys have provided a couple here in the chat, which I think is wonderful. But there's some local community ones. So Lifescape, that's an adult daycare program they have in Winnebago and Boone counties, which I think is a wonderful thing that's providing that respite. Or if you are a caretaker and you do have to work full time due to financial barriers or whatever your circumstances, Lifescape is great for that adult daycare program. I do know, I don't know how helpful it is, but I know they have adult daycare programs, and the next closest, I believe, is Madison, Wisconsin. And then AARP Care Connect, it's an online support, but they'll provide you with resources in your area, and or just chatting for that online support. And then agingcare.com, in-home caregiving and respite care for full-time. So they will look for people in your area and send them to your home. Or if you're working with somebody, you can give them that website and say, they'll help find a caregiver to provide that respite care, or that full-time care if you're burning out, or you just realize it's just not something you can provide. And then there's also non-emergency medical transportation services. I didn't put it on here, but Speedy, so SPEEDEE, transportation, that's a non-emergency medical transportation, or Seabreeze. That's another one. So if it's something where you are just completely taxed, or the person you're working with is completely taxed, or can't find time to get somebody to their doctor appointment, or whatever it might be, their medical appointment, these companies do provide non-emergency medical transportation. So, and then the National Institute for Aging, it's a website. They also provide, if there's a little box there that says caregivers, if you click on that, they provide a list of worksheets. So worksheets for daily activity checklist, for questions to ask providers, questions to ask caretakers if you're looking to hire one. They've got worksheets for nearly everything you can think of being a caretaker. So I enjoy, going on there and printing those out for some of my clients to provide to them, to say, okay, you're looking for respite care. Here's a worksheet of examples and questions that you can provide and ask, people you might be interviewing. So again, that's the National Institute for Aging. It's a government website, but they also provide, again, the worksheets, but they also provide videos too for caregivers. And then Call to Care is another one. It's an online support group as well, but it's through Johns Hopkins. So Call to Care is just a bunch of resources for caregivers in general. And then Medicare.gov. you can find a whole list of a bunch of things in general for caregivers, whether it's looking for resources, looking for groups, um, looking for a bunch of different things. And then local therapists like myself, if you guys are somebody who is a caretaker and you've decided, okay, I do want to look for a therapist, you can email me for a referral. Again, I'm more than happy to help myself. But if you don't feel I'm a good fit, it doesn't have to be within four corners. I would genuinely want the best fit for whoever comes my way. And if I'm not it, that's okay. And if it's not somebody at four corners, that's okay too. I've worked in the social work community for many years, so I do know a lot of wonderful therapists that I would be willing to send people to, or help find somebody, that you might be a good fit for, because I think getting support as a caretaker is so important. Again, just having that therapist or therapy to hold you accountable is just something that's really important to me. I am a little biased, I believe, though. So, thank you guys so much for listening, and hopefully you guys might have learned something on caretakers and maybe some of the apps that I provided, or I know I learned some things today with some of the programs here. So I appreciate everybody. Does anybody have any questions, concerns? Oh, somebody mentioned that Seabrew's great. I appreciate that. I've never used it myself, so it's good to hear the other people do enjoy it. I know it's a resource out there. So, okay. Well, thank you guys.
Well, before you go, I have some personal experience with trying to do caregiving, and I just want to thank you so much for your presentation, um, Cody, especially because my wife has been trying to uh, caregive for her mom, and you're absolutely right. It really poses a big strain on um, her personally, health. And,
Mhm.
I think a lot of us, boomer generation, are getting into that area where we're taking care of aging parents. And
Absolutely.
when I type in that we have a caregiver support group for parents with young children, it's been around for quite a while, but never thought about having just a caregiver support group for people giving care to
Mhm.
aging parents or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, it's it's interesting because we're called the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Um, I guess what we're trying to do is trying to prevent mental illness by
Yeah,
and really just caring for wellness, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I-
so it's something that we may think about expanding that caregiver support group, although the needs of people with young children are unique and different from those of people caring for other people who are older. But maybe an additional support group might be something that we can consider.
Absolutely. And I'm in agreement with you. I think it's a different population, but I think the meaning is the same, right? You have to take care of yourself in order to take care of those around you, right? And whether
Yeah,
that's your child dealing with mental illness or whether that's your parent that's aging.
yeah.
So,
As we have our first set of grandchildren too, and
oh,
it's things we as we pass through these seasons in life, you don't really understand what it's like to take care of an older parent until you get to that place.
it's
Well,
true.
you have a master's degree, so you have probably studied it, but um, I don't know if you really understand it until you've been there. And that's why support
Mm,
groups are so important because you're talking to other people who are doing the same thing.
absolutely. Yeah.
Um, Something I guess that I didn't also mention is we do have a number of family support groups, and
Mm,
that is for people who are supporting a family member with mental illness. Um, Still different than dealing with grief issues. But I recently had a chance to facilitate the support group for people who are maybe have adult children with mental illness that's different than the caregiver support group for those who have young children. So even if you're not in the Northern Illinois area, this video will be stored on our website, excuse me, our YouTube page. Look for resources at NAMI.org. That's our national website. And you can look for a NAMI affiliate near you. If you're not in the NAMI Northern Illinois area, you can go to the national, just NAMI.org, NAMI.org, and look for an affiliate near you. And each NAMI affiliate has different programs. We're actually trying to create a way that people can find out what online support groups there are in other NAMI affiliates. And as you mentioned, Cody, a lot of this stuff has just been available since 2020. The availability of things like telehealth came out of the pandemic, and it's our NAMI connection support group for adults 18 and older is available in person and online on Wednesday evenings, but is also available on Sundays on Zoom only. So there's a lot of different ways that we can help each other, but we do need to help each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and professionals like you really are special, and it's great to hear that you're willing to help us refer people to other therapists in the area or find us resources. Last commercial for NAMI services. I know that you are familiar with Kinsey. Kinsey White is one of our mental health advocates who works with people in the Rockford, Illinois area. She helps make referrals to other services and is connected to people like Cody. So again, you can contact us here at NAMI Northern Illinois. Our website is naminorthernillinois.org. It's all spelled out. Thanks once again, Cody.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Thank you guys for listening. Appreciate
Yes,
it.
thank you all for joining us. Have a
Thank
great day.
you. You too.